So let's talk a little bit about the people that make all of this work. Ron, can you kick us off there?
Sure. The short answer is there's a lot, to be perfectly honest. And if you kind of start digging down into those, we look at skill sets. And some of the most important ones are, they kind of extend beyond basic project management. You get into the realms of business analysts, those type of people that can really dig in and understand our customer needs. More importantly, what is that organization's business requirements? Who are the stakeholders? What's really important to them? Some of the other rules are strategists and your financial resources. Strategists are really important when you're looking at someone that has the ability to understand the overall scope of the project. A lot of these projects that we're dealing with or that we're involved in, they're very extensive, they're very intricate. There's a lot of moving parts. So it's very critical that you have somebody that understands all of those moving parts. And you can look at it for, it comes down to anticipating and be able to identify what type of challenges are we going to encounter in these projects before they actually happen, so that we have our solutions readily available, already prepared, and you can bring them to bear as those challenges or obstacles occur. Financial resources, all of these projects have a certain amount of budgetary constraints. You know, they may be CapEx, they may be OpEx, but it's a critical resource to be able to identify what type of financial reporting is really required within these organizations or a specific project. From there, we've got our, the obvious ones, your program manager and project managers. Program manager, just strictly due to the scale and the scope of a lot of these projects, it's really critical for someone that can separate themselves from the day-to-day activities, be a little more strategic, and focus on the leadership teams, the stakeholders' satisfaction, as well as just really focusing on communication and risk management, making sure that anything that potentially becomes in jeopardy or may put the project at risk, that they get identified and addressed and resolved in a timely manner. Project managers, they basically own all of those day-to-day tasks, resources, and communication type activities. A couple that may be lesser known or lesser thought about is your technical and engineering resources. We're largely dealing with IT and/or security related projects. There's always the need for that technical engineering input or design, or, you know, it might be config validations. The security expertise, this kind of falls into the area of when you're dealing with IT and security, you always have frameworks that apply. These potentially could be NIST 853, other versions of NIST. You have control identifications, and you know, in some cases you have regulatory type compliances that impact these projects. And if they are overlooked or not addressed, it can really throw some serious delays into those projects. And then last but not least, we have technical writing type skills. If you're dealing with large volumes of documentation, if you have system security plans, you have to address POAMs and artifacts. That's where those technical writing skills come in.
Well, it's a lot of people. Uh, so Mark, you've had to build a lot of these teams, obviously inside of SynerComm. What type of people are you looking for? So let's just say I'm a CISO and I'm looking to build a team that can handle this type of project management, um, or these types of projects, I should say. What are some of the attributes that you're looking for?
Yeah, great question. I think, as you can tell, Ron, just from everything you relayed there on the different groups, obviously, for starters, you have to have a background in and some training in those particular areas. That only gets you so far, and that's true, I think, of any role anywhere. If you're just doing what you've been trained to do, you're not adding much more value other than what would be expected. For projects, especially the kinds of complex, intricate projects, Ron, that you mentioned, you've got to have innovation. So any resource in any of these roles, in some cases, it might be one resource blending a few of these together. You've got to be innovative. You've got to be able to think not just what is the one solution that you know works, and so that's what you're going to go with. When you're demonstrating innovation, you are showing that you're processing, you're listening at least twice as much as you're talking. You're understanding and processing what's happening around you, and then you're doing research and thinking about what else could work in this particular situation. What is really the need versus maybe what's just been asked, and then address the need. Find ways to really solve that problem. Innovation is critical, and it seems so simple and it seems so obvious, and yet it can be difficult to find in people. We all like sometimes the quick answer, and that might not always be there. Critical thinking goes hand in hand with innovation, another major attribute. With critical thinking, that is, it's similar to innovation, certainly, but that is you looking for more information from more areas, looking for the patterns, looking for what's interconnecting with what. How can you align strategy with your program, with your project? What are some of the bigger issues that might be at play here? If you're just looking through a small lens and you're trying to solve the problem with a little bit of information, you're not going to solve the right problem. So by expansive thinking, by thinking critically about other areas that are related, you can definitely drive forward a more effective solution. And finally, team orientation. You can't Individual contributions are extremely important, but you can't solve these major problems by yourself. It takes a team, it takes collaboration, it takes applying that innovation and critical thinking with others together, doing it on your own, of course, but working with the team and amplifying your ability to get things done.
So what advice would you give a hiring manager in how to test for some of these attributes?
Yeah, testing is definitely a challenge. This is not a multiple choice test to find the answers and whether or not someone really works here. As we're looking for people to fill these roles, of course, we'll ask questions. We'll look for specific scenarios. We'll seek examples of where they've actually done whatever it is we might be asking. We look for those answers to come in that star format. Tell us about a situation, a real situation you've been in. What were you tasked with, or what did you task yourself with? What actions did you take, and what were the results? And when you ask that, a lot of our candidates will, early in the process, they'll be in what I call they're in the woods. They'll tell us what they would do in those scenarios, what usually happens in those scenarios. And if we can't get to specific examples, that's usually a pretty good indicator that maybe they're not quite there yet. They need a little more help. And where we get people that do move past that, and we need to be a little bit more interesting with them, probably we'll do a little role playing, of course. We'll go through scenarios. We'll see what they might do, scenarios that we come across. But then as we get progressed a little further through that process, we'll do a little unexpected real world collaboration, commiseration. We may come into a room suggesting that we're facing this real challenge. Maybe we're even showing a little bit of emotion and that it's really upsetting us for whatever reason. And then we'll see how that candidate works with us. Do they start asking us questions? Are they seeking to understand? Are they looking to just tell us what they think we want to hear? And that can be a powerful tool in that final stage to really narrow down the people that you think can fit in these roles.
And so let's look at the other side of that. Over the years, what are some red flags to look out for?
Yeah, jumping right into solutions, asking a question, and automatically the candidate knows the answer. And it may not be a question that has just such a clear-cut answer. So that just talking immediately solutions before asking questions. When we're talking or looking for when we're interviewing a candidate, sometimes they'll fall back on, and we want them to, of course, tell us what you've done. But based on what they tell us, a lot of times we can get a feel on what they've told us on how they think. If maybe they're not problem solving for us right here in this meeting, in this interview, but when we start asking for those examples, it'll be pretty clear to us that we're looking for team building or orientation. We're looking for innovation. And what we're getting is just a technical solution or what everybody and anybody might answer to solve that problem. Especially with project managers, as Ron pointed out, that's a critical aspect, of course, of program and project management. When we come across project managers who they fall back on their project management training or certification, they're throwing terms around, they're playing with what would usually, what you might assume would work in a scenario, but they don't really get deep. We don't really talk solutions. We just talk technical terminology. That's a red flag. And then, I don't know, Ron, is there anything that you might add, especially as it relates back to those project managers? Some of the red flags that you've seen?
Yeah, I think I've got one red flag that just kind of continually comes to mind. It's not limited to just strictly project managers, but it's any other resources we would bring to bear on a given project, and that's individuals that don't have the ability to listen. In our whole approach is to get a better understanding of how to serve that customer and how to solve the problem. And to be honest, you can't get there if you spend 90% of the time talking. You need to spend 90% of the time listening. And the other couple things I'll add, these were just my positive attributes to think about or that come to mind, is just flexibility and just an overall willingness to adapt. Because no two projects are exactly the same. No two customers are the same. No two approaches are the same. Just that person who is highly flexible, highly accommodating, and willing to think outside the box, extremely helpful.
It's a binary thinking, right, Ron? That becomes a big challenge, a big red flag. Black and white, either you're right or you're wrong. And very seldom do we find ourselves in situations where the answer is so obvious.